Okay, so in this video, what I want to do is I'm just going to give you a long walkthrough of my process when I'm trying to fix someone's LinkedIn pipeline. Now, in today's video, I'm going to talk and show you exactly how I would do this for an executive coach. Now, a lot of the stuff that I will share in this video can be transferred to whatever niche, but I figured that it would be quite useful or like as a way of being able to show people my thought process when it comes to trying to best get effectively just best generate leads from LinkedIn. So here's what this is going to generally look like before I get into it. The first thing is I want to do some deep research and really understand the actual person that I am sort of trying to help, their industry, their ideal client. I want to really understand that first and foremost so that I know what I'm working with. Right now, this typically is going to be done with a custom GPT, which I have made for the situation. So all the thinking and the processing can be done very, very quickly for me, and that's ideal. That's the first thing. Then once we've done that, I'm then going to focus on making a LinkedIn sales nav list. Right, this sales nav list is primarily, and for reference, this is LinkedIn Sales Navigator. This is primarily so that I know exactly what to filter for to reach their ideal client, right? And obviously, when I've got all this deep research put together, I can literally take that and I can pretty much copy and paste that to another GPT, which I have specifically for making and refining LinkedIn Sales Navigator lists. And then that's going to give me effectively everything that I need, or at least something to start with. Then once I've done that, I'm then going to move on to LinkedIn profile. And then again, similar process, right? I'm going to take this deep research and I'm going to copy and paste this into the profile. Now, funnily enough, yes, I do have a GPT for this also. And the reason why is just because it simplifies the process. It can give me something and then I can refine it, manually myself in order for it to give me what exactly I want from it, right? Because for reference, right, the sales nav list is obviously to be able to target the right people. The profile is obviously to make sure that I'm speaking to the right people. And then really from there, once we've got this, then obviously, well, we could sort of go down the content route. I'm not going to cover content in this video, but I will cover things such as at least outreach or at least certain parts of it that perhaps we could consider. So this is generally what the process is going to look like. So let's go and dive straight into this. So you obviously won't be able to see the sort of the name and the profile picture of this person, but I figured it was best to be able to at least give you an example of just basically a live profile. So this person is an executive coach, and basically what I'm going to basically sort of talk you through exactly how I'd process this. So first and foremost, obviously, if we look back here, we're first going to focus on this sort of deep research sort of focus. So typically what I do when I'm working with a client is that they would, I'd get them to fill in a form, 6, 7 minute form, and it would give me, a lot of the more details. But given that I'm doing this publicly, I'm just going to basically copy and paste information about them. So for example, if I just go to this deep market research analyst, I can basically click start and it's just basically going to ask me for more details about the individual. So in this case, I'm going to copy and paste their about section. I'm also going to copy and paste more stuff around their sort of business as well, just to make sure. Hold on a minute, just to make sure that I can give it enough, right? Because at the same time, like a lot of people will wonder about AI. AI is only really as good as the stuff you can give it. So in this case, obviously, section one is industry overview. So talking about executive coaching, talent advisory, service layering, key industry sort of thing, and market trends and such. So typically, what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy all this. I'm going to put this in what I call a master document. This doesn't have to be anything to do with me. This is just more so for the GPT to see. And then obviously in this case, say, hey, are you happy to move on to common buyer roles? I say yes, and it will go through each one. Reason I do this individually is because if I ever want this GPT to expand on anything or change on anything, then I can obviously do that bit by bit as well. So you can see here, obviously common buyer roles, sort of senior executives and such, high level leaders. And so it gives you some sort of roles as well. Now, this stuff here is going to be really, really useful for when we're trying to put together a LinkedIn Sales Navigator list. So I think this looks pretty good. So obviously I'm then again going to just copy and paste this in here as well. That's cool. And then I'll just click yes. And for reference, these are custom GPTs that I've made and refined, right? This isn't something you're just going to find. But this generally really helps at the moment. So obviously, for this section, who they help and what they serve. So they serve ambitious leaders and such, what they sell, one-to-one executive coaching, all the stuff here. Now, this obviously might seem like a lot, but at the same time, the more I can give the GPT, the better it can give the stuff for me, right? And at the same time, I can do this all manually, right? But it is easier for me to go through all these things because if I can get given something to begin with and then I can go and refine that, that's great. So section 4, then it's going to be common pains. So common pains, obviously, this is going to be good for the optimizing the profile to make sure you speak to the right pains, but even things in terms of content and in terms of things with outreach. And for reference, building this effectively, what is maybe a master document, when you built the whole thing, you can use this as a way to optimize the profile, as a way to change sales outlets, as a way to create content ideas, doing outreach. Like you can use it for lots of different things, but it's just useful to have it there as a whole. So that's obviously ideal. So, common pains, feeling isolated at the top, can't talk openly about doubts and such. So there's a lot of really good stuff here. Typically speaking, I've sort of now got this at the point where I don't really need to make adjustments to this. But if I do need to, then I've always got the ability. So the next thing here is market awareness stage. Now, this is really, really important because what you need to understand is every industry has a different level of market awareness, right? So, for example, my industry, which is more lead, more so lead generation, people typically are problem aware, right? And by that, I mean people know that leads aren't coming in as consistent or as qualified as they should be. In terms of if they are sort of solution aware, typically speaking, they sort of know what they maybe should be doing. A lot of the times, it's just a matter of perhaps they just don't have the time for it, or they don't have the consistent energy for it. And so then it's just a matter of, well, if they know the problem and they know the solution, typically it's if the solution is good enough, if it's going to work, if it's going to be a good enough trade-off. However, other industries you might find that people just don't really know the problem, right? Right? They don't really know the problem that's going on. Maybe they see symptoms, but they don't know the problem. And so you need to understand what the market awareness is currently so that you can use that messaging in your content, your outreach, your profile, those sort of things. So obviously in this case, just sort of saying chances are it's mostly problem aware, solution aware, as obviously, just sort of talks here about those sort of symptoms as well. So I think that's all really useful. And so we will just sort of click yes on that and we'll paste that all in here. And obviously this document is going to get, pretty lengthy, but that said, it's not for us to necessarily go through, more so for them. The next is buying triggers. So effectively, this is sort of why the individual would even perhaps consider this sort of thing. And so we got some good information here. I'm not going to necessarily read all of this stuff because this is more so for the GPT. Just getting it here. Buying objections. This can sometimes be quite useful, right? It's just a nice way maybe of considering what messaging can look like. So, for example, one of them here is I'm worried this will expose my weakness and make me look incapable. Right? That's going to be typically a genuine fear that an executive is typically going to have, before opening up. So yeah, effectively what I've got is that this GPT is just gonna pretty much give me a lot of input, which I can then give to other GPTs and other systems to help me constantly refine as well. So languages and phrases, they'll tend to use. Obviously, this is really sort of useful, and I can keep going through all of this. Now, obviously, like in this approach, and for reference, obviously, I would usually have a bit more information to work with, but this is obviously just an example. So we're going through it. So current trends and hot topics. This stuff is going to typically be useful for things like content and such, and so that's going to be good. Obviously, in this case, top competitors and alternatives. This is something that just can be quite interesting and can obviously be pulled into content. But for me, my focus is just if I can give as much to the AI and the GPT as possible, then I can get as much as I can in terms of a response as well. So that's typically my approach as well. So there's a few places here which we'll just copy and paste through. So just going through like that, which is cool. And then the next focus is then messaging gaps and opportunities. Now, typically speaking, obviously, I would obviously want to have more of a personal input from the client, but obviously it can sort of give through a few things here. So put all that in. And just to finish off, so then we have consequences of inaction. This is actually quite interesting because obviously people are more driven by pain than they are so pleasure. So also being able to give the sort of the GPT enough about the sort of the actual pains and such is really key. So we have the buyer personas, wins and risks. So, what do they benefit from, achieving the solution and what are the risks to it? Then again, this is all context that's going to be really useful for the GPT to see and such, and so on and so forth. And then really this last section is then social proof and case studies. So in this case, obviously I would want specific, well, if my client has specific social proof and case studies, I'd want to sort of know that and such. But at the end of the day, that's pretty much that. Now, with all the 14 sections basically completed, and obviously I would sort of fill that social proof stuff in manually. It does then say, in terms of messaging priority, the recommendations. So, typically I'll just sort of basically copy that in as well. So that is pretty much the master document, if you will. Now, this is about sort of 13 pages long. Sometimes it's actually usually longer, but obviously I'm not working with as much information as normal. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to download that as a TXT file, just so it's a very easy thing to do there. So that's cool. So we've obviously got all the information. So the first thing we want to do, so obviously we've done the deep research now. Now we want to look at making the sales nav list. So I'm going to go over to my LinkedIn Sales Navigator Refiner, and I'm going to attach that file, which is the master document there. And I'll just say this is a new client. Make me a mock list. And so basically it'll be able to look through that actual document that I've attached, and it will basically sort of add the relevant stuff. So what we've got here, so we've got ideal setup. So we've got the UK, US and such. Company headcount 51 to 1,000. And obviously it's given a context here, suite for mid-market and growth stage organizations. Seniority level, functions and such. Keywords, industries, male sort of buyer bias. So typically speaking, when I'm targeting people, I'm going to target more so males, just simply because of the sort of buyer bias, and at least that males are typically going to actually, take more action with the things and actually be more just sort of to the point. So that's typically the approach that we'll take. So I mean, if I go and actually put this together, so if we just target the UK at the moment, and we'll look at company headcount. So saying 41 to 1,000, 41, 51, 51 to 1,000. We'll just do, yeah, we'll do that. I think I'll more so look at, yeah, so it didn't give me any job titles. So I obviously want to make sure that that is very specific, that it can sort of give me there. So typically speaking, when I am looking when I am looking to filter for, or at least put together a a sales navigator list, I'm looking for the actual results here to probably be from about maybe 1,000 to sort of 3,000, 4,000, because we want to make sure we've got enough people in the list, but we also don't want to have too many people as well. So what we have at the moment is that we've got the headcount, we've got CEO and executive. Now, what I'm also going to do is I'm going to make sure that they post on LinkedIn. And the reason being is simply because they're somewhat using LinkedIn, whether they've just been reposting or something, but they're going to be more likely to respond. That's literally all it is, right? And you can see that's obviously put the list down to 11,000 as well. Now, I might also use years of experience and do more than 10 years as well, just to make sure we got someone that is in a position where they actually sort of that profile language. English obviously didn't do much there as well. And yeah, and so obviously if I sort of look back at what it was talking about here, so I'm not I'm not sure if this is going to work. Sometimes this is a bit dodgy, but it might work. Or maybe I'm gonna have to put it in here. Okay. Mm, No, we'll leave that. We'll leave that. That's a bit dodgy sometimes. Cool. And obviously in this case, if I want to go for very specific industries, I can obviously go and do that. Now, I think for this sort of person who's an executive coach, I have a feeling industry's not going to be too big of a deal. But if I go maybe professional services and perhaps even I go, well, but we see that's giving me 2,000. If I go business consulting and services, yeah, so that's giving me 2,000. I think I'll probably, and yeah, I think I'll probably just start with that if I'm honest. So you see, I mean, and this is the thing because like whenever I'm working with sort of clients, typically I'm not looking to make the perfect list. I'm just looking to start with something, right? Just start with something, just so we got something to work off. So in this case, obviously headcount from 51 to 1,000. I've made sure obviously it's posted on LinkedIn. We got CEO and we've got executive as well, and geography just in the UK, industry, professional services, business consulting services. More the experience is more than 10 years, and profile language is English. Obviously, from there, I can then basically go and save this. Obviously, because I've already sort of done this, I can go and save this. But also, what I'll look to do is I'll also look to bookmark this as well, so that whenever I go to do connections, I can literally just open up the bookmark and I'm away. So that's really cool. And typically speaking, from here, I'll then be sending 20 to 30 connection requests every single day, Monday to Friday, sometimes even Saturday, just to make sure that I start getting in front of them. Now, for even for clients that are on board, I'll typically try and do this like immediately, just so that we start getting in front of the right people. So that is pretty much that. And obviously, once I've saved that, or sorry, save that, then that's when the sales nav part is then done. So then we're going to move on to the profile, right? Because the profile is really important because, for example, in this case, let's say we've obviously started sending connections with this list, these people, and they are then going to look at their sort of most recent connections, right? They're going to obviously sort of click this, they're going to go to recent connections, and all of a sudden, they're going to see that, well, effectively, they're going to see you pop up. And the first thing they're going to do, typically speaking, is, well, they're going to be wanting to look at your profile. They're gonna obviously see that headline, and they're gonna want to look at your profile. So if that isn't in check, or if that isn't as good as it could be, that's going to cause a lot of problems, and it's just not going to be simply as easy. So that's cool. So the next thing is then LinkedIn profile. Now you obviously notice I have a custom GPT for all of these things, and it's just simply because it makes my life a lot easier. So obviously in this case, I basically set it up so that it's like cool, copy and paste more details and such, and then what it's going to do is it's going to make ideas for a banner, a headline, and about section and services section. So what I'll do again in this case is I'll add this master document, um, and I will go and say, make me a list for the executive coach. Cool. Cool. So what it's obviously given me, and for reference, when I am optimizing the profile, I typically try and model it off what I'm currently doing with my profile. So in this case, right, my focus is, you'll notice my profile is just plain and simple. My focus is having a sort of like a big title, which typically want to be pretty short. Mine's probably actually a bit too long at this point, but it typically wants to be pretty short and to the point that calls out the sort of main desire and benefit. And then you have a shorter line below that perhaps expands on that or such. For me, obviously, I've got more clients, hands free, pay more only when you win. And then the line below, I've got just a short guarantee that I'm running at the moment, as well. That's typically what I'm going to do with the banner. So in this case, the big line for this guy would be unlock leadership that delivers results, which at the moment, for reference, he just simply has his name and that he does coaching, and he's obviously got a few things up here as well, which is sort of a bit okay. But typically speaking, it's not calling out any pains or any desires or anything. So so obviously if this guy had literally unlocked leadership that delivers results, that would be pretty cool. And then obviously in this case, the below is, from overall to unstoppable. I help leaders turn insights into measurable business impact. So, and this is the thing, right? This doesn't have to be perfect, and obviously I can go back and forth with this, but this, like this, typically is going to be pretty good, and I would say a much bigger improvement. So the next thing here is obviously the headline. Now, I focus this headline on the format of I help ideal client with problem through solution, right? Or through offer, right? So in this case, I help senior leaders organize over, sorry. I help senior leaders and organizations overcome leadership roadblocks and achieve business goals through executive coaching and talent advisory. So I think that's pretty good, right? And the thing is as well is when I'm going to optimize headlines, first of all, people really don't care about you. All they really care is about who you help, what you do, and how you do it. So what this guy has in here, and for reference, there's no real way to do a profile. There's only preferences. But for me, who's sort of been on LinkedIn for a while and doing this stuff for a while, um, I sort of pick up on these things and such. So, for example, this guy obviously sort of has, dad, ex-monk, and like lots of other stuff here. And the thing is, it's just a bit of an information overload for me and probably for other people that see his profile. So, typically speaking, I would just try and keep it as to the point as possible. So, I help, ideal client solve problem through solution, right? Or at least that sort of approach, right? It doesn't have to be word for word like that, but that sort of approach. Because the main reason I say that is because this is obviously, as you can see more so at the top here, this is what is also going to be shown at the top of your content. Like obviously when you send connection requests, when you send messages, right? So for example, as you can see with my headline, all you can see here is I help founders book consistent sales, and then obviously it cuts off to calls. But but already you can see it calls out the individual, and it also starts to call out the problem that I solve just right there and then. And obviously, if I send a connection request, then that would probably be a bit more visible as well. But you see what I mean, because it's just trying to be to the point as possible. Then we have the about section. Now, obviously, I'm not going to read through this whole thing, but generally, the idea that I basically try and focus on is just being able to make sure that the about section effectively calls out the problem that ideal client solve. And honestly speaking, I might need to update my about section, but I don't usually worry so much about it. I sort of typically like to talk and show more about my process in terms of my approach. Obviously, here I've got sort of like almost like a three-step approach. And then I've also talked more about typically my sort of approach, and I've also sort of got things such as like social proof and results that I've also got in there as well. right? And I find that that's sort of quite useful to have. Typically speaking, I don't really worry so much about the about section, but it is something that is obviously going to be useful to have. And in this case, for the services section, which I do recommend you do have, I'm pretty sure it sort of helps things like SEO and stuff, and just being able to pop up. I pretty much just get the GPT to condense the about section under 500 characters, and that's that. So that is pretty much the majority of the profile. The only other thing that I would then consider is the featured section. Now, this guy in his featured section has obviously just sort of put posts in there. He's got like an interview in there, which is obviously cool. Typically, what I'm doing when it comes to the featured section is I want to put as much social proof there as possible, right? I want to put as much social proof there, and the reason being is because when people are, viewing your profile, and actually let me just sort of refresh real quick. So typically, when people are viewing your profile, right, they're going to see a headline, the banner, and such, and they're going to scroll down, and they are almost always, like a lot of the time, they're going to hit your featured section, and my sort of approach with this is, well, if I can create this catalog of social proof that effectively, shows the results I'm getting or shows that I'm sort of effectively somewhat good at what I do. Doesn't need to be the craziest results. Can literally be screenshots of testimonials. But something that actually boosts that sort of authority is really key. So for example, for me, obviously excluding that first YouTube video, I've got a video testimonial there and I've sort of talked more about like how I actually helped her. And then I've got screenshots of me sort of booking sales calls and just generally sort of my bookings that I get through on my email. And then it's not only sharing the actual social proof, but it's also talking about how I got that result and the approach that I did. And typically, I'll usually aim to sort of add all these create a post like this once every 2 weeks, maybe once every 3 weeks. And then I'll just feature this in my featured section, which means over time, I just build up that social proof there. It's a really useful thing to have, and typically speaking for him, I would probably recommend doing that. He does actually have a lot of recommendations as well, which is really useful. However, typically speaking, for me, I'm usually not really looking at recommendations. So I might find that it's just better to put stuff in the featured and just ram that all there, because that's typically going to be the best approach for that. So that is pretty much going to be the profile, right? And for reference, when I do go and make the banner, I'm going to do this in Canva. And to be fair, it's probably going to be a similar style to what I've got here. Obviously, brand colors and such is going to play a part in it. But for me, I'm not a graphic designer. I didn't spend too much time on that. For me, my focus is just trying to get as clear messaging as possible with what I'm doing. So then obviously, for reference, obviously we've done the deep research, we've set up the sales nav list, we set up the profile. Now this alone is pretty damn useful. It's pretty damn useful because honestly speaking, if you just set this up, right, you've optimized the profile, you made the sales nav list, and you start sending connections, you are no doubt going to get in front of the right people and they're going to be seeing exactly what you do. However, the only other issue you then have is, well, if you're not doing outreach, right? If you're not doing outreach here, then I mean, you're just going to be relying on the fact that they're going to come as an inbound, and they're just going to sort of come right to you. And hey, inbounds are great when they happen, but at the same time, you don't really have as much control over that. So you want to make sure you do some level of outreach as well. Now, typically speaking, obviously, with sort of this guy industry. Now, what I do have as well when it comes to outreach, which let me just find the right one. I basically got a outreach assistant. Now, what this will basically do is that, for example, if I just put me, for example, it's going to look through my sort of master document, but it's also going to look through the sort of message versions which I've got set up, and then basically that process will go. Now, what I'm doing with outreach for reference is I am focusing on being able to personalize the message, but I'm also going to focus on asking a qualifying question as well. And this qualifying question is just to see if the individual has a problem that I can solve, right? So, for example, what I could do, and I've actually never done this before, so we're going to see how this works out. Messages based on. Yeah, so typically I would do these manually. Yeah, it didn't do that right. Hmm. Okay. Okay, that's fine. Yeah, so typically what I'll do is, so if I look more so at mine, which if I just zoom in, it's not really going to do that well. So what I've got down here, and I'll probably move myself because I know I'm going to be in the way. Or actually, no, I can move that up there, can't I? Yeah, so what I've got is I've got different variations of messages which I'll have. So obviously up here, I've sort of got, hey name and then compliment. That's usually the approach I'll take. And the GPT will fill in, and for reference, when I'm doing compliments, I'll typically copy and paste their recent post and I'll go and then paste that in here so that it then gives me their name and it makes a small compliment based on their recent post. Reason being is because if I can, well, first of all, if I get a personalized message, to some degree, I know that they've taken a look at me to some like to some level. So, for example, I had someone that sent me a cold email about my YouTube stuff not too long ago, and it was a screenshot of one of my YouTube videos. And it's like that caught my attention because it was personalized. So same thing can go for LinkedIn messages as well. Then from there, typically I'm going to have the exact same qualifying question, right? And I'll test these things out. But so for example, my version one is curious, lead generation pretty consistent nowadays, or is it often hit or miss? Right, and I've got a few variations. The one I'm running at the moment is, hey name compliment, and then curious, do you feel like lead gen systems actually feel simple these days, or does it take more effort than you'd like? Now, you can obviously see that these are pretty they're pretty upfront, right? They're pretty upfront. It's maybe a sort of a bit in your face type of thing. Um, because my approach is I'm not trying to pitch someone. I'm also not trying to lead them on and sort of play around with them. Typically, I just want to get to the point, and I just want to see if they have a problem that I can solve. So, for example, actually, if I can show you this in action, if I look at this guy's recent post, what I can do, let me just put my pen down, is I can basically copy his name and such, and I can basically paste that whole thing in here, and then it will say, hey, and then obviously the person, nice on the recent, but actually, no, it didn't even do that right. Um, try that again. Wow, it doesn't want to do that. Let me do a different post. I don't know why it's doing that. Sometimes it's not as always working. I need to refine it. Hmm. There we are. Sometimes the GPT doesn't want to do it as well as you want to do it. All right, let's retry this again. There we are. That's what we wanted. So typically speaking, what it will usually do, obviously not for this video for convenience, it'll say, hey name, or at least it will fill in the name. Nice one on, opening up new client spots, right? Which obviously is basically what, this guy was talking about. Curious, are you finally during study these days or can it feel hit or miss? Right. And obviously, if I put latest version. There we are, right? So it's obviously done my latest version, and I can basically ask test different versions. Now, typically speaking, when I'm going to test each version, I might test each version, for maybe 2 weeks or something, or just basically until I find something that's consistently giving me good results, right? And typically, and often, obviously, once I've got the GPT set up, which obviously I do, then it's just a matter of changing these questions. Sometimes I use sort of, like obviously the GPT to put together some questions, but typically it is going to be this approach. So overall, let me find my pen. Overall, my approach is, well, obviously it might seem like a lot, like a lot, but this is effectively just the setup. Because once you've got this stuff set up, then it's just a matter of obviously creating content, setting connections, and doing outreach. And you're not even having to do that much outreach either. So let's just recap. So the first thing I'm focusing on doing is making that deep research master document, right? I mean, this obviously covered things such as like personal wins and risks, sort of like consequences of inaction, competitors, but things like sort of like languages used, objections, market awareness, stage, common pains, and all sorts, right? And so that's obviously really useful, more so for the GPT, but even maybe just for you, just so if you want to get that sort of refresher of what's going on. The next thing is obviously then using that for the sales nav list, right? So for me, and to be fair, right, obviously I know I've got custom GPTs, which obviously makes things a bit easier, but there's nothing stopping you from putting together something like that with AI and then just, effectively, pasting that file and then just say, hey, can you make a LinkedIn Sales Navigator list with this? It'll probably do a pretty good job. Obviously, I'm using ChatGPT Plus, which I think gives a better model. I think I'm using like 4.0 or something. But yeah, and so obviously when making the sales nav list, that's obviously something that you can go and do. And the reason obviously why I'm using the AI like AI is just because I can outsource a lot of the thinking, or at least a lot of the heavy thinking, and then I can look at the stuff it's given me, and then if I want to refine it, then that's obviously something that I can do. But that obviously just makes things a bit easier. And then obviously from there, it's then obviously going to the profile, which, like I said before, when you have that master document, you can just literally add that file and then just ask it to make make you a LinkedIn profile. Now, the profile you probably want to be a bit more specific with in terms of what you want it to do. So, for example, for me, I make sure obviously the profile follows the sort of the I help ideal client with sort of problem through solution and such. But this is pretty much the approach I take, and obviously I've sort of shown you the outreach side as well. Now, this is effectively how I would help this person effectively just sort of fix their lead gen approach, right? Because at the moment, right, he's obviously got the banner, which I think with the adjustments which I made obviously from this video, I think could definitely sort of help and speak more so to the idle clients. I think if he changed his headline to be like obviously a lot more specific, like that format, that'd be really useful. And obviously, having that feature section with social proof would also be great as well. And of course, if the sales nav list here, which, sending 20 to 30 connection requests a day might take 5 minutes, but going to get you in front of the right people. And then I would then go to reach out to those people which have accepted those connection requests. So hopefully you found this video useful. I'm considering maybe doing more of these as well. But let me know if you found this useful. And yeah, I will chat soon. Cheers.